We actually have breaking news right now concerning the indictment of former President Trump. We've just received confirmation that former President Trump has, in fact, been indicted by a grand jury for allegedly making hush money payments during the 2016 campaign. We are working to get our Washington correspondent, Blake Berman, on that. Obviously, this is breaking news happening right now. So we are scrambling to get people in place right now. We are going to go out to Janet Johnson. She is a defense attorney. Janet, thank you for being with us. I know you were going to talk to us on a completely different topic, but again, this is breaking news happening right now. Kind of walk us through the process right now. We were told that this grand jury may not vote for a few weeks, that we may not see an indictment or any type of decision until next month. So what would have changed that this is now happening this afternoon?
Nichole, yeah, what a shocker. I mean, it's a historic date. What changes is probably this is done in secret. So they don't show their cards. They don't tell us the time frame. They had a pre-scheduled month break that apparently they were going to go into. And apparently they held a vote this afternoon. We don't know the exact charges, but they did vote to indict. And, that's how grand juries work. They work in secret, and we're surprised when we get the results.
And Jenna, something that so many people have said is, I mean, this is certainly not a slam dunk for DA Alvin Bragg. Just kind of walk us through what will need to be done, because an indictment absolutely is not a conviction in any sense of the word.
No, it's actually still the opposite. You're presumed innocent. So right now, as we talk about Donald Trump and how he's been charged, we have to say that he is presumed innocent. He hasn't been proven guilty. People keep talking about the John Edwards comparison. He was charged and actually went to trial and was acquitted for something very similar, essentially paying off a woman with whom he had an affair. But what happened in that trial is that it was deemed that he did not do that in anticipation of running. The evidence in this case, and we know there have been a lot of Trump insiders who testified, we don't know what they said, but there was evidence from his own fixer, Cohen, saying this was in anticipation of his running, and she was paid to stay quiet so he could become president. So it is a little bit of an uphill battle because it's a very unique theory. It doesn't happen very often. But if you were going to prosecute somebody for this charge, this would be sort of the ideal situation, because you have a woman who will say, I had an affair, I was paid money. There are lawyers who will testify, yes, we helped pay the money. And there's a check with Donald Trump's signature on it, which is Exhibit A in this prosecution.
And Janet, you are a Florida-based defense attorney, so kind of walk us through. I mean, this is certainly unprecedented. We've never seen a current president, certainly never seen a former president indicted by a grand jury. So kind of walk us through what the process will look like. This indictment has now been handed down. Okay, so what happens now?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk about he wanted to be handcuffed and there would be a big show of this. That is not going to happen. There's no scenario where he's going to be deemed a flight risk. He's been out. He's known that this was coming. He actually told us 2 weeks ago that he expected to be indicted. He's going to walk in a business suit to Bragg's office. He's going to sign a signature bond, which is not going to have any money attached to it, just going to be, yes, I promise I'll come back. And, his lawyers will start going to court for him. Most of the time, his appearance will be waived. So it won't be like the Gwyneth Paltrow trial where we'll see him, walk into the courtroom. He's probably very rarely going to appear in person. And this could take, months. This is probably going to be a pretty lengthy prosecution. And, there may be discussions about plea negotiations, but we are a long way from that. The charges have not been officially unsealed. And he probably, maybe tonight, knows what he's charged with. His lawyers probably have contacted him and said, okay, we have the indictment. We're going to make arrangements to turn you in, but essentially just basically sign a piece of paper saying you'll come back to court.
Okay, so Janet, there are so many scenarios here. So let's say that this indictment does, in fact, lead to a conviction. We know that former President Trump is currently running for president. So if he is then convicted, what would happen then?
Well, as a convicted felon, he would not be eligible to serve as president. Now, if he is convicted and he appeals that conviction, I mean, this could take years. Even the prosecution itself could take over a year. Obviously, it's 2023 right now. 2024 is right around the corner. So, he certainly could still be through this process appealing, going all the way to the Supreme Court, which was not, would not be unlikely. And as we know, this Supreme Court is not entirely predictable. So, he would likely still be able to run. And if he won, he would likely be able to be sworn in. Although during a second term, essentially, he might be disqualified.
And talk about, I mean, what is the first defense? You are a defense attorney, again, Florida-based. What is the first defense that Trump's team of lawyers here are going to wage?
Well, he said he didn't have sex with her. So, that's been his sort of defense all along. So that may be his word versus her word. But I think the defense would be likely what John Edwards ran. And if he's smart, he would talk to the lawyers who defended John Edwards. I don't know if they would take this case. But essentially what they said is, yes, we gave this woman money, but it wasn't to cover up any wrongdoing in anticipation. So it wasn't really about the election. I think that's the best argument, to say this is a private matter between Stormy Daniels and myself. Yes, I obviously wrote her this check, my signature's on it, but it wasn't because I was afraid that something would come out in the election. And in fact, a lot of things came out in the election and I still won. So why would I be afraid of this? This is hardly the worst thing I was accused of. I think that would be the best defense, to say, yes, I paid her, but it wasn't because I was afraid and I was trying to cover up for the election.
And Janet, let's talk about the fact, involved in this case, we have Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney, Trump's former fixer, who also served time in prison. We have Stormy Daniels, a porn star, a former porn star. These are people that may not necessarily also come with the best of reputations. How is that potentially going to impact this case by DA Bragg?
Well, that's a great point, Nichole. I mean, I've tried to argue that in court and say, look, all of the state's witnesses, all of the government's witnesses are undesirable. But it would be very easy, and it is entirely predictable, that the prosecution would say, you know what? We didn't pick these people. You know who handpicked these people? Donald J. Trump. That was his lawyer. That was his friend, perhaps lover. These are witnesses that are, yes, they're undesirable, and they are attached to Donald Trump. And that reflects on him, not on the prosecution.
And Janet, in all of this, there are other investigations in which the former president is currently mixed up in as well. How could this case, this indictment, potentially impact those?
Right. A lot of people have speculated, this may be one of the weaker cases against him. Why are we starting with this case and not with something, involving January 6th or involving the documents that he kept at Mar-a-Lago? Obviously, this is the one that was ready to be teed up first. The grand jury came back with the indictment and we're about to see it. I don't think it'll affect it in terms of the other prosecutions would be impeded in any way. I know when I have a client who has multiple fires and there's cases that, are just mounting against us, it makes it a little harder to fight on every front. And maybe it makes it more likely that he tries to negotiate some sort of disposition if he pleads to a misdemeanor. Remember, Bill Clinton pled to a misdemeanor about, lying in a deposition, and he still was president. So if he pleads to a lesser charge on any of these, makes some of it go away, and maybe it makes his political future more viable.
All right. And Janet, before we let you go, and again, thank you so much for talking to us on this breaking news. How likely is it, you think, that we will see our former president of the United States in handcuffs?
I think it's almost zero. I just think there's no reason to do it except, if he wants it, and defendants don't get to demand how they're apprehended or how they're arrested. So if he comes willingly, he's not going to be in handcuffs.
All right, Florida-based defense attorney Janet Johnson, we thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.